got a wonderful talk with our wonderful guest, Remy Blumenfeld. And before we show the short film, I want to properly introduce our guest, Remy. Remy began his career in television, where he created and produced hit formats for major broadcasters in the UK and the US. As an entrepreneur, he founded 2 successful independent production companies, both of which achieved international recognition and were later acquired by global media groups. Over the years, Remy has become one of the most respected business coaches in the creative industries, helping founders, directors, and executives in film, television, digital media, and gaming to unlock their greatest asset, which of course is themselves. He's a regular cultural columnist for The Hollywood Reporter, recognised as one of the UK's leading LGBTQ+ voices in media leadership, and a guest tutor at the National Film and Television School. He also leads masterclasses at the BFI and the Danish Film School. The short film you're about to see was directed by acclaimed filmmaker Bobby Sheehan and produced by Working Pictures. It gives a glimpse into Remy's personal and professional journey. I do hope you enjoy it.
My name is Remy Blumenfeld, and I work as a coach for people in the creative industries, TV, film, media, publishing, and the arts. What that means is that most of the people who come to me for coaching are founders or leaders in the creative industries, and I work with them to get results in their personal life and their work life. And very often when people are working in the arts, those two are quite intertwined because you are your biggest asset. And mostly with clients, they're quite surprised when I ask them, and what is your survival strategy today? Age 30, 40, 50 or 60. And the survival strategy is exactly what they were programmed to have as 5-year-olds. On the other hand, I definitely had been pretty much on that track. I was in the school orchestra. I played the violin since I was the age of 3. I learned the Suzuki method. I did act. I was in the National Youth Theatre of Great Britain, played in Twelfth Night on the London stage when I was 16, and I did edit the school magazine. And I think I went into TV specifically to prove to myself, to my father, to the world, in fact, that I was not good enough. And I've seen that play out to this day, time and time again with my clients. It's why they went into the performing arts, it's why they went into film or television. It was to disprove that they weren't not good enough. To their family, to their father, to their friends, to themselves. And the number of reasons why that is are many and various, but usually it comes from a sense of otherness, a sense of differentness, a sense of not being good enough. So age 17, when I left school, I got to move to New York. And I got a job as an intern at Channel 11. And as far as they were concerned, they were hiring an American person because I had an American passport and a social security number. But I also had an interesting English accent. And it was a really great place to learn about TV. I learned how to write, I learned how to produce, and I learned how to edit. And after that, they were like, well, why don't you do these reports? So I went on to do that for the news on Channel 11. I had a weekly segment which was called Remy's People.
They're dapper and they're terrorizing Tinseltown. They're called the Cary Grant Gang, and they've already left dozens of Hollywood dames distressed and penniless in Beverly Hills parking lots.
One of the very first stories I did in New York was on the doormen of New York nightclubs, because I saw that they held the power to who got in and who waited on the sidewalk. Inevitably, as a result of having made them stars on local TV, I became one of the people who got into the nightclubs rather than waited, because now I knew them all because I'd made them stars and made them famous with their mothers and grandmothers who watched them on Channel 11. So I was very much kind of living the life of someone who was an artist in downtown New York, even though I was far from that. In reality, I was just a TV reporter. And after that, I did something called the Remy Report, which was me going around New York doing stories about the arts. And now we're back to my childhood territory, right? So interviewing musicians and artists and authors was kind of very easy for me, and I kind of understood them and got on with them.
Is it really true? Do people get their parts for movies on the casting couch?
Some of them do. I mean, it's been going on. It's no secret here.
And then I'd done that for about 7 years of doing 1 minute 30 reports on this or that. No one was giving me a show of my own, and I felt like I didn't really have the family or the old friends that I had in the UK in New York, it didn't feel like a nurturing or sustaining place at the time, and it was the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And I moved back to the UK to make a show for American TV in London, which I thought might last 6 months or 9 months, and I ended up staying. And I made shows as an independent producer, and we made a whole lot of shows like Flavour, which was the first black music show on British TV, shows like Bombay Blush, which was the first Asian pop culture show on the BBC. And we went on to grow the company, and we sold it to Endemol, the company that was at the time the world's biggest producer of entertainment. I often ask founders to list their assets, and they'll list the lease on the building and their library and their catalogue and their contacts, and they won't say me, because we're invisible to ourselves. We define ourselves as I. And the I in the creative industries can be quite enormous and all-encompassing, and yet we are all a multiplicity of selves. I'm not one fixed entity. I'm my childhood self, I am my intentional self that's here talking to you, and with an artist, I'm my creative self, but I can also be my agent, my manager, my publicist, and we need to separate out those different parts of ourselves, because if you spend all day in the studio working on something and expect it to sell itself, it's not going to happen. The world of marketing and commerce exists in a separate world from the world of creativity. And yet even for an artist who wants to sell commercially, that dichotomy between the person who creates and the person who has to communicate that to the world and sell it is still there. And becoming a coach, I kind of enlarged that life purpose to live and die with as few regrets as possible, and to support as many people as I can to do the same. Because if I've only had 1,000 clients by the time I die, but 1,000 people die without regrets, that will make me feel a lot more happy than 1 million people watching a program I made. The applause for that should go to Bobby Sheehan, who's not here, but he would want you to know that this wasn't the film, this was just an edited down version of it.
For the purpose of tonight's talk, of which I'm very honoured to be interviewing you, Remy. And I know Remy from old. I'm Sunita Shroff, by the way, and Remy took a punt on me many, many years ago as a television presenter for one of your hit shows. So thank you very, very much indeed. Now, on to you and your career. You began your career as a television producer and an entrepreneur. And what first drew you into that world?
Well, I think, like I said there, it was the need to prove myself, right? To my dad. So my dad didn't really watch TV. My parents didn't watch much except for the odd arts program. I later discovered when I was at ITV that the kind of people my parents were as viewers were called Dorethians. And in audience research terms, that meant that if they liked a program, no one else would watch it. So I should kind of consider myself lucky that they never did like or watch any of my programs. But when I went into TV in the first place, it was to make a point, right? If 1 million people watch me and like me, then I must be good enough, and not on my dad's terms. But I kind of used it was a little unfair really, because I used all the things I'd learned growing up to be a TV producer, but to prove it in a different context. And I think a lot of people go into TV, maybe not anymore, but go into digital media, being influencers, content creators, to validate themselves, right? And in my case, it was very much to validate a negative, to disprove that I wasn't not good enough.
And that really resonated with me, and I think I actually reached out to you a few weeks ago saying, Remy, are you sure you want me to do the interview? Are you sure there's nobody else that could do this interview with you? Because I just felt a little bit of imposter syndrome, actually, which I know you understand.
Definitely, look, it's a really human thing to question our worth. And it's very early in the interview to be talking about the saboteur, but like the saboteur is a voice we all have in our heads, but comes from evolution, right? It comes from survival. It comes from the days when we needed something to keep us safe, right? The voice in our head that said 3,000 years ago, stay in the cave, don't leave the village, stay by the fire. That stopped our ancestors being eaten by wild animals or killed by savages or falling down a rock crevasse. So it's still useful for us in, everyday context. Don't don't walk into that fire, right? Don't step on that landmine. But
Yeah.
when the voice is saying, don't send that email, don't apply for that job, don't ask for a raise, then it no longer is serving us. So, so I do recognize it very much. And entitlement is something which shouldn't really be the domain only of straight white men, right? We should all be allowed to feel entitled to wherever we are and deserve a place at the table. So, growing up Jewish and gay with parents who were artists, I definitely didn't feel like I had a place in the society that they had moved to, but I learned to claim it, and that's kind of what I help people to do.
Absolutely, and prior to that, you went on to found 2 production companies, not just one, but 2 production companies that achieved major success. What made them stand out in what is, of course, such a competitive industry?
Well, neither of them would have worked at all today, let's face it, right? I mean, the environment we were in back when you and I first worked together was a very different environment where there was a lot more risk-taking on what we now call terrestrial broadcast TV, and there wasn't much of anything else, right? So the risk-taking took place on BBC Three, on ITV, on Channel 4. And that's why we were allowed to do what we did. So we created a niche at Brighter Pictures, which was creating edgy programming around the edges of society, basically programming that spoke to people who weren't normally seen on TV. And that was who we were. So I mean, at the core of that message and lesson is something I definitely pass on to clients today, which is you've got to make what you love, you've got to make programs and content that you would watch yourself, and you've got to do what you do best, and you've got to have a niche, right? I mean, we probably would have loved to. We did it completely by accident, by the way. It wasn't like we set out to create a niche. We just, we would have loved to have made programs for everyone on every channel about everything. But what we found got the most traction was programming that we could credibly deliver because we were in Brixton, because we were 2 young gay men, unbelievably, but that's what it was, right? So we were 2 young gay men in Brixton. We were creating shows about the people who worked in our company, and that's what we made. We made programs about the edges of society for mainstream TV because there were no other clients.
Yeah, well, I mean, and there were some brilliant programs, and it was groundbreaking, really groundbreaking stuff, as we saw it in the video montage there. You later made the leap from producing programs to coaching people, and that's quite a big shift. What prompted that?
Well, it was a leap much later, and it was a leap which didn't seem like such a leap at the time. So I was at ITV Studios, I was director of format, I was asking people who I knew and respected, how did you learn to lead, right? How did you learn to do your job? And no one had any good advice other than, well, you could train to be a coach. Because at the center of coaching are some things which are very similar to good leadership, right? A good leader needs to inspire you. A good leader needs to challenge you. A good leader needs to hold you accountable. And a good leader needs to champion and cheerlead you. And that's what a good coach does. So I learned what a good leader looks like just at the same time as I learned what a good coach looked like. And then I came back to TV basically to coach people in TV, but the only thing was no one wanted to be coached. And any relationship is two-way, right? You need to hire a coach. You can't have a coach kind of sneak in on you by default. I thought I'd kind of sneak in and coach the people I worked with, and on the whole that didn't go very well. So I started coaching people in other sectors. I coached someone who's a museum director and someone who's a publisher, other creative spaces, and I discovered a few things in that process, one of which is there's some really lovely people doing creative things that are not in film and TV. And also that it was very rewarding.
Yeah. And it's that, because you wanted to obviously follow your passion of coaching, is that what made you leave the production and sort of focus on coaching? Is it?
Well, I could say that, but I mean, when I started in TV, my first boss was a guy called Bill Littauer, and Bill Littauer had the voice of the honey monster, which I'll only try, I might try and slightly give an impression of what he's done. But he said, Remy, there are 4 stages to a TV producer's life. Get me Remy, no, sorry, that was the second one. Who is Remy Blumenfeld? Get me Remy Blumenfeld. Get me a young Remy Blumenfeld. And who is Remy Blumenfeld? And I felt like maybe before I was finally in the 4th chapter, because I think we do go round, right? Like I had that trajectory as a TV presenter, I had it as a producer, I had it as a founder, and I'll doubtless probably have it as a coach as well. Like you go in, things are cyclical, right? And so it wasn't like I was being offered huge, wonderful projects to make and I was turning them down. It was like I had great coaching clients who I was very excited to work with, and the energy in TV felt very much like it was on the decline. And now I get to kind of witness some of that as a coach rather than as an active participant.
And I mean, the industry has changed dramatically. I mean, I took a 14-year break to have a child, and I've come back in, and oh my gosh, it's a completely different monster. And now you're working with these amazing creative founders, producers, and CEOs. And what kinds of challenges do they bring to you most often?
Well, like you said, I'm working with them at the most challenging imaginable time, which I couldn't have predicted, and so it's very difficult to get them the kind of results that they deserve always. But what I try and do is make them as fit as possible for the environment that they find themselves in, which means being more resilient, being more determined, being more pushy, although I don't like that word, but like if you don't promote yourself, you don't act like an agent for yourself, you don't manage your career, you won't have one. And there were plenty of people working in TV when I was starting out who just kind of coasted by, right? They didn't really promote themselves, they didn't really watch TV, they weren't that bothered, or they seemed to not be. But those people have no place today, right? They're not working. So 40% of freelancers are out of work right now. 1 in 8 young people between 16 and 24 are not at work or in education. So it's a very different, challenging landscape. But the fundamental challenge that everyone faces that's the same is their own sense of their worth.
And that never changes, right? So, you know, I think that's definitely a message that really hits home. You know, you've got to have that self-belief. And you talk about the idea that our greatest untapped resource is ourselves. And what do you mean by that?
Well, it's tapped to different degrees in different, you know, we all like to think we're using our resource, but when I talk to founders, I usually say, like, what are your company's assets? And they'll list their catalog, their library, the lease on the building, their client relationship, and they very seldom say me. And I think we often become invisible to ourselves just because, well, I'm just there, right? I've got my projects to look after, I've got my clients to look after, I've got my team to look after, I've got my family to look after, but the I sort of becomes the last thing. And I think it's very helpful to think of oneself in the third person, right? What does Sunita need? What would be good for Sunita? What does Sunita want? Because unless you think of yourself in the third person like that, you don't recognize the valuable, creative, experienced person that you are. You just think of just me. And just me gets ignored. So putting yourself to the top of the list of things that need to be tended to and asking yourself those questions is hugely important. And obviously that's what a coach does, right? They create that space for you to get used to asking questions of yourself, which you don't normally ask.
But I suppose, I mean, that's a fundamental underlying rule of coaching, isn't it? You've got to, you know, love yourselves, believe in yourselves. But how can you explain the 4 inner roles that you help leaders develop, and why does that matter?
Well, look, in an ideal world, each of us in the creative industry would have a great manager, right, who would be looking at our career as a business. What are you earning this year? What do you want to earn next year? What's the plan? What do you want to do tomorrow? What do you want to do in 10 years from now? And they would be working with you to create that structure. And in an ideal world, most of us would have a wonderful agent who was out there hustling for work and spotting opportunities and saying no to things that weren't right. And you probably have a great publicist too, right? Doing your PR and managing all your outreach and placing you in the right places and being your voice and managing your LinkedIn.
And everything else, I mean, forget, just LinkedIn, there's
Right.
Instagram, TikTok.
Everything else. Yeah.
Everything. There's so much to manage now,
You'd also probably have a coach. And I have some clients in the States who have 4 coaches.
Oh.
So I am their business coach, but they have an emotional coach, relationship coach. And people have lots of different coaches in the States. So you'd have at least 4 people on your team if you were at the top of your game and resourced to do that. And yet most of us as freelancers or founders, we're just us. So separating out those different parts of the job, and it's much easier to talk about yourself, even if you're using the first person rather than third person. If you imagine you're talking in the third person and you're writing it as your publicist, it's much easier to ask for a raise or ask for more money if, even though you're talking about yourself, you're imagining you're negotiating on behalf of this brilliant, talented, resourceful woman called Sunita, and she deserves more. And so adapting those ideas of roles in your mind, like a lot of coaching is acting. It's acting out a way of being that's different from how you normally act. And sometimes I invite clients just to think of someone who's really good at being a self-promoter, someone who does it effortlessly and with good grace, and then just walk into their shoes. I'm sure like everyone sitting here can think of somebody, they may be mildly annoying, but they're really good at promoting themselves. They're really good at being visible, being on a platform, speaking out. And they do it with grace, and you kind of think of a little bit of you wishes you were them. And you can be, just by doing what they would do, saying what they would say, being how they would be. And don't overthink it. Just bypass that part of you that's held back and is thinking, oh, it's so pushy and doesn't look good. And we all carry a lot of stories about self-promotion in an age right now where, as you were saying, you have to be good at it. And so many of those stories are, biblical, right? He who puts himself first shall come last in the kingdom of heaven. So a lot of us grew up with that stuff from an early age. It's like it's sinful to promote yourself.
Yes.
And it's cheap and it's tacky,
And
but
vain.
it actually isn't, right? It's just necessary. So you have to get over that, and however I can help you get over that, I will. And one of the ways is to channel those champions. But if you think about those different parts of your career as agent, publicist, coach, and manager, it kind of helps to kind of sit with yourself in different conversations and say, because if you don't have anyone asking those coach questions, then you tend to get run ragged, you don't rest, you don't reward yourself, you don't celebrate the wins, and what kind of life is that? So I'm not saying you need all those people on your team to succeed, but you need to think like all of those people to thrive.
Yes, and I mean, not forgetting the expense of all of that as well. So if you can do that within, that's already a start, right?
Yeah, it is. And I'm a big believer in take what you need and go. So my mum is always saying to me, why do you need more clients at this point? Right? You've been doing it for so long. I'm like, because all my clients leave. They stay for 6 months and then they go. They get what they need. Some come back, and some who are very well resourced, like the ones who have 4 coaches and an agent, manager, and a publicist, they keep me on and I talk to them once a month. But most clients, we do the work, it lasts 6 months, they get what they need, they learn new ways of being, and they go on and they move on.
And I know some of your clients who have actually, of course, sung your praises and have had incredible successes with you. So moving on, let's start with a challenging agent. How does that role show up in creative leadership?
Well, you tell me. You've had a challenging agent at times, I'm sure. And they ask the questions that, it's basically being that person for yourself in your life. So what an agent who would be looking out for you and opportunities that were right for you and turning things down that were wrong for you would be doing and saying. And you've got to just devote some of your time to being that person, otherwise those opportunities won't show up.
And is that because you know, for example, I'm the sort of person that finds it really hard to say no to anything. You know, any cause I will champion, any charity that needs my help, I'll help them. And I just feel like I can't say no to anything. So
well, saying no is really, really important. And because if you don't say no, and if you don't feel you can say no, and if other people don't hear you say no, then your yes becomes powerless. It's only if you have a powerful no that your yes means anything. Because otherwise it's just the default position. You have to recognize that everything you take on is a choice. It may not always seem immediately like a choice because, hey, there was only one offer, and so I said yes to it but there's also a choice to not work, or to not take that offer, or to wait, and recognizing that choice is hugely important. So I guess that's one of the things that an agent would do.
Yeah, and so covering the agent, what about the challenging manager?
Well, again, so that person sits above your life and looks down at it more objectively and looks at your work and your career without all the stories and all the baggage that we carry about it, right? So it's just, what do you want to earn? What do you want to be doing? What does success look like to you? And those are all good questions to be asking ourselves regularly so that we stay in check and make a plan. Like, I get all my clients to do a plan on what success looks like to them.
Yeah.
Because success looks different to every person, but a good challenging manager wouldn't let you get away with just saying, I want to be richer, or I want to do better, or I want to, they'd say, well, how much do you want to earn?
Or what does it look like?
What does it look like?
Yeah.
In a granular way.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I compiled quite a few questions. I wanted to be prepared for you. And that's why I was offering you all little sheets of paper. If you wanted to ask any questions anonymously, then please do. But otherwise, at any point, are you happy if people just put their hands up? If anything's relevant and you just want to interject, there we go, straight away.
Yeah, I'm much happier if that happens.
Yes.
Someone in the middle has a question.
Yes, hello. The thing about not being scared of being annoying, this is what I always feel before I kind of go like, okay, I should post on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. And I'm like, oh, but it's such an annoying person who's always like, this is what I'm working on. So how do you overcome that? Or how do you...
So is this specifically about like posting or other things that you think you worry people are going to find annoying?
Yeah, I think just putting yourself, being the pushy thing, I guess.
Yeah. I think you need to look at who you find annoying and recognize that maybe that is annoying for some people and maybe it isn't, but actually whether you're annoying to a couple of people or not annoying to them shouldn't stop you from being seen and heard, shouldn't stop you from asking for what you need, communicating what you're doing. I mean, there's a whole nother tier to this, which is around, being of service. Because if you're actually saying something that's of interest or of service, then that's seldom not annoying, even if it doesn't. I don't really care who's saying it. I'm just interested in what it is. So if the less you make it about you, and the more you make it about your team, what you're doing, what you've learned, what you've experienced, then the less annoying it's likely to be. But it's also fine to have some people find you annoying. Because the most important, I think most people have a lot of stories about other people thinking I'm pushy, or thinking I'm too ambitious, or whatever. This is in particular in relation to reaching out, because in our industry, probably in every industry, but in our industry at the moment, your network is everything, right? Who you know, who's thinking about you, who's talking about you when you're not in the room, is the difference between working and not working. So people, you don't get jobs from talent manager and listings and adverts. You get jobs because somebody was thinking about you and they called you for the role, and that's who got the role that you applied for that you didn't get in that was advertised. So reaching out to people regularly and often is necessary. And so often clients say, won't they think I'm pushy? Won't they be annoyed? Won't they think I'm like a serial stalker? And the truth is, since you're not a serial stalker, since you're all well-adjusted, creative, experienced people, the only way they'd think that was if you were always talking about yourself. But if you're saying, just saw this program you made, just love this comment you made in The Guardian, great picture of you and Broker, like what you said on LinkedIn, just talking to Sunita, who mentioned working with you in 2015. Whatever it is that you're saying that's noticing them, no one's going to think you're a stalker. No one's going to think you're pushy. They'll just be pleased to hear it. And you have to always use yourself as a barometer, because you have to think, if I got this, would I think they were a serial stalker and pushy, or would I be quite happy to get it? And if the answer is I'd be quite happy to get it, then just post it or send it.
I think certainly before social media, I used to send Christmas cards to all the various producers and directors and crew that I'd worked with, just to sort of, hey, don't forget about me. But now I think it is a case of commenting after all their posts and acknowledging their work and their accomplishments. So I think it's great that I don't think that's annoying at all. I think it's wonderful to showcase what you're up to, I feel.
Sharing what you're up to and noticing what other people are up to is just part of what everyone has to do now. And I think it's useful just to look at, when I'm saying no to this, what am I saying yes to? If I'm saying no to posting and no to reaching out to people, what am I saying yes to? And usually you're saying yes to something you probably don't want.
Yeah. So, and that leads me on to the promoter and publicist. And for me, I mean, obviously you were talking about them earlier, it sounds particularly relevant in today's creator economy. So why do so many people resist that role?
Well, thanks to our question just now, we kind of heard, right? It's like we all carry stories around promoting ourselves, and it plays into the saboteur's story of why you?
Don't feel good.
You're not. Why you? Why? No one wants to hear from you. No one's interested in you. You're not special. You're not different. That voice in our head, most people carry, and the moment you have to go out there and do something publicly, your saboteur is very affronted. So the first thing I would encourage you all to do is to give your saboteur a name, because it's not you. We say, oh, I heard I was talking to myself. No, that voice that's self-limiting is 3,000 years old, and it's not you. So I call my saboteur Roger. From American Dad, if you've ever watched that. So he's kind of a gender-bending, shape-shifting alien. And that reminds me of my saboteur, which is kind of, he's definitely gender-bending and definitely shape-shifting. And he says whatever he needs to say to make me do nothing. Because your saboteur is the most happy when you do nothing, because he knows that right now you're alive. So that's great. So don't speak to anyone, don't ask any more questions, don't do anything. Just stay where you are. Frozen is fine, because you'll still be alive frozen. So taking risks is terrifying to your saboteur. Sending emails, reaching out, talking to people, promoting yourself, terrifying. It feels like death sometimes. Does anyone recognize that feeling of like, it almost feels life-threatening when you're about to apply for a job or send an email or talk to us? Yeah, but you're not going to die. Nothing's going to happen. The worst thing that can happen to any of us is failure. But we react to failure in our body as though it's life-threatening. And so the more exposing it is, the more terrifying it is.
Yeah.
And then we tell ourselves stories like, oh, people will think I'm pushy. But really that's just an excuse to not do it because it's threatening. Because what I'm really afraid of is being seen and rejected. But if I'm not seen, I can't be rejected. But that seems too straightforward, so I'll create a story that other people will think I'm pushy. In fact, I am terrified of being rejected.
You? No,
Well, we all
you're
are.
just
So
saying,
I could have said Sunita's terrified,
Okay.
but it's
It's
each
true.
of us, right? Each of us is terrified of being
Yeah.
rejected, and we're terrified of failing.
And is that where the holistic coach comes into it?
And that's partly where the holistic coach comes in, but the holistic coach is also about your well-being, your welfare, your body, your mind. Like, when have you last rested? When have you last taken time off? Are you doing stuff that's rewarding, that you love? Can we celebrate this win? It's looking at your life from a well-being perspective.
Yeah.
Because the agent and the manager just want you to do well.
So, any more questions? Oh, lovely. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. So I have a question. What's actually the difference between a manager and a coach?
So a manager looks at your work as a business, your career as a business, and they strategize. Now, I'm a business coach, so I sort of fall between those two. Like business coach is slightly different, but I do have clients who have a manager, and their manager is happy to have me as their coach. The coach is working with your human potential, and the coach is working with what are you doing to help or stop whatever it is you say you want. So the manager might say, okay, you're going to double your turnover every year for the next 3 years. The coach will work with you to figure out why you're stopping yourself from doing that and how you could be helping yourself to do it better. If that makes any sense.
Thank you.
Hi there. I was watching an interview with you, which was fascinating, and you were talking about attachment in terms of rather than commitment and attachment. And this reminded me of what you were just saying now. Looking from a holistic point of view, say for example, you have a project, the self, pushing the self and knowing where the boundaries are. Oh, sorry.
I was just thinking they might not be able to hear you at the back, so.
So this issue of, I find it interesting, the issue of attachment, for example, to a project and commitment, and where your boundary then comes with knowing your value and recognising where compromise and compliance come into this when you're navigating this. Do you have advice for your clients on this?
Well, maybe I should share with everyone who didn't see that little interview about like what the distinction between being committed and being attached, because I think it's a useful and important one, and then we can maybe look at the rest of it. So most people start off being attached, right? Especially in the creative industries, right? I am this painting, I am this sculpture, I am this proposal, I am this show. And we think that's a good thing because, of course, I put myself into it, I put all of me into it, and this is me, this is me. But it isn't. It's a product, it's a service, it's a picture on a wall, it's a sculpture on a stand, it's something, it's an object. Now, obviously when you're feverishly creating in the middle of the night, and writing at midnight, and you're putting yourself into it, and to be attached in that moment of creation is normal and understandable and wonderful. But the moment something's finished, it really helps to not be attached. And because when you're attached, it's quite heavy. It's quite heavy for you, and it's quite heavy for whoever you're showing the proposal or the painting to, because suddenly it's about you, and they can tell it's about you. Now I'm not just looking at this painting, I'm looking at Sunita who made it, and she's making it all about her. And so commissioning editors, I coach quite a few, and they will confirm that this is the case. They can tell when someone is attached. And generally when someone's attached, we want to walk away from a project. We want to walk away from it because it all feels a little heavy and tricky and difficult. I'm sure there's a certain kind of documentary where being attached might be good. I can't think of what that is right now. But look, mostly when people are attached, it's all about them and their ego. And they want you to say yes because they want you to validate them. And so if I say I want some changes, or I don't quite like this, or can we have it be 6 instead of 9? Or, no, this is me. And that kind of tremulous I which exists in that attachment is a killer for success. People want to walk away from it. If someone invited you for a meal in a way that was attached, you'd say no. Would you come to my house next Tuesday at 7:30 for my world famous lasagna? But would it be nice to get to know each other over a meal sometime? That's fine. So being committed is really useful because it's essential. It's kind of what we're talking about here. Being committed is saying, I will do whatever it takes to get this made. I will do whatever it takes to make this happen. I'll stop at nothing. And that's great. But I'm not making it about me. You can be committed and not attached. So being committed and not attached means just being focused on the result. So I had a client the other day, and they were both committed and attached to a project that they were pitching to a streamer, which was kind of outside of their sweet spot. They're a director who made a different kind of program for the streamer. It was in the factual space, but it was more kind of ladsy adventure stuff. And they were pitching a series which was a access-driven music show, which they just chanced upon through meeting somebody. And the commissioner really liked it, but obviously the question for the commissioner was, are you going to direct it? Because you've never directed anything like this before, for us, ever. So to sell something, you need to show that you've made stuff like it before that's worked. And this guy couldn't. So I said to him, like, how would you show up if you were just committed and not attached? And he said, well, then I'd ask the commissioner who she thought the right director would be. So that's what he did. And when he came back from the interview and he said, it was amazing, because she said, I didn't expect you to ask me that, but I'm glad you did, because I'd have a real hard time selling this up, because you've not made anything like this for us before. But as a result of not being attached and just saying that, he was able to have a conversation with her about other shows he'd done way back that were a little similar. She was able to have a whole conversation he would never have had to effectively defend himself and make a case for why he should be the director, but not saying that he had to be. So he was saying, I'd love to, and I think I could, and here's why. But that conversation would have never happened if he just assumed that, of course, he'd be the director, because he was a director and he pitched it. So attachment is a killer, being committed is necessary. And I think there are a couple of other parts to your question, but I can't remember what they were.
It was about finding that boundary between the compromise and from attachment and then compliance and understanding it. That was interesting to me was you were talking about believing in oneself and knowing where your boundary is. So that ability perhaps to, is there any tips you have for being able to step outside and kind of go, when am I out of my depth here? Do you know how to navigate that?
I think it always helps to see any situation from a different perspective, right? So if you're able to look at yourself as a player rather than be trapped in the story. So if you look at yourself, in this guy's case, from the perspective of the commissioning editor, looking at the project and looking at him, looking at you, and just wondering, is this the right person? Have they made shows like this before? Can we trust him to deliver? You ask those questions about yourself objectively, and just be sure that the saboteur doesn't take over, because the saboteur will always say, oh no, you can't do it. And what my client ultimately did was confident, because he made a case for why he could make it, but he didn't say, I have to. And so, yeah, it's always hard to be objective about oneself, but that's where the power lies.
Thank you.
The gentleman at the back, can you boom?
That's my second name, so of course I so Remy, so I was one of the original producers at Brighton, and it was a fantastic launch pad. And I had working in a period, I think, for TV when it was, really exciting, very solid. Had a touchwood, lovely career, and did a film, did everything. But I was never happy until I gave it up. And because it is slightly a mad environment. And part of that was, and I'm still, like the museum example, still being creative, but outside the film and TV world, as such. I still do TV films, but outside broadcasting films. And so there's two questions. I thought, first of all, the thing about the saboteur, I'm going to write him tomorrow, I'm going to write him up. I think that's brilliant. It's personified. I think that's incredible. But the two questions are, one is this self-worth. The idea that when you're working in the industry, you so identify with the fact I'm a producer, I'm a director, and if I'm not working as a producer or a director, to hang on to that self-worth. And I found it incredibly difficult, that I found my identity absolutely wrapped up as to whether I was directing or producing.
Yeah.
That's the first question.
Well, can we just talk about that for a sec? Because I think identity and self-worth are kind of big points, big important things. So I'm going to just ask these questions of everyone in the room, and you can answer in your head, right? Are you alive? Are you healthy? Are you safe? Are you sane? Are you free? Are you loved? Are you loving? Are you creative? Are you intelligent? Are you kind? Are you generous? Are you a loving partner? Are you a loyal friend? And look, I could go on, but the point is, if you answered yes to most of those questions, you're way ahead of most of the world. And that, to me, is a more important identity than, are you a TV producer? Because you will be all of those things, whether or not someone says yes to giving you a job as a TV producer or saying yes to a project. And I think very often we go in with this very tenuous idea of our identity, and we want other people to validate us, right? Whether you say yes to this project or not, whether you come away from this evening thinking it was useful or not, I'm still all of those things. So I'll be fine. And you are now making content in a new space, okay, it's not broadcast TV, but you're making content for clients. And you're good at what you do, and you trust your instincts, and you trust your ability, and you've got experience, and you're competent, and you're capable, and you'll be all of those things, whether or not you're, whatever you're called, producer, director, dog's body, you're still all of those things. So I think it's so important to be clear of our own identity and reinforce that, and that's why I won't take on a client if they refuse to do daily affirmations. Because daily affirmations are like vitamins. It's like, why go and see a doctor if you're not taking vitamin C and you need it? We all need these daily reinforcements to ourselves of who we are, because one night's sleep and you've forgotten it, right? And I get clients to write their affirmations out on paper, photocopy it, laminate it, because your saboteur erases the ones it doesn't like. Suddenly you're just saying the ones that your saboteur is okay with. And the ones your saboteur is okay with are the least useful ones. If the voice in your head is saying, no, you're not, that's a great affirmation. Especially if it's true, right? If you're capable and experienced and talented, and your saboteur is going, oh, you're not that. Those are great affirmations. You said you had a second part of the question.
Yes, so it kind of leads on to that. And you've answered it a little bit just then. You won't take on a client unless they do daily affirmations. But would you ever be in a position where you've got a client and you actually realise that maybe they don't have that talent, maybe actually their identity is too caught up with the projects they do, or maybe the industry of where they're trying to get to is just not there and they're just not content? Have you ever been in a position where you've actually, as a coach, because you're going to lose a client, to say, actually, I think your best thing is to pull out of this industry or not to do this, because I think or is that a very difficult thing for a coach to do?
Well, coaches are a little bit like ChatGPT, right? We're programmed to be sycophantic to keep you on as clients. If you say you should leave the industry in your first session and you think it's your whole identity, that might be the end of a beautiful client relationship. But as you've identified, that is most coaches, that's not me. So I do tell it like it is, and I do challenge, and it's not always or often what people want to hear. But I'm not prescriptive in the sense of saying you have no talent, because that's not for me to decide. But I do encourage you to listen to what the market is saying. And generally, the problem that I face is not so much about whether people have talent or not, it's about whether they are solving the problems that the market needs, right? Because we're all in an industry called show business. It's a market. So many people come to me and their LinkedIn profile says, I am an award-winning, BAFTA-winning, RTS-winning, Grierson-winning producer. No one cares. What you need to explain to me is what problems you solve in the market. What do you bring to the table that people need right now? And if you can say that, then we can work with that. But if it's all about your ego, I can't help you, because the market doesn't need your ego. The market needs solutions to problems. So the more clearly you can define what it is you bring to the table, rather than simply saying, I love going to parties. Tell me what you're going to bring. My hot point gas boiler broke the other day. And I went online to find someone who says, I fix hot point gas boilers. I didn't end up hiring someone who said, I'm in love with the world of kitchen appliances. And that's what most people say.
Yes, go ahead.
I also had the great pleasure of working at Brighter Pictures a long time ago.
Wow, who is that?
Sorry, my name's Susan Crook.
Susan, nice to see you.
What struck me then, and particularly now looking back, was how ahead of the curve it was, how far outside the box you were thinking, both in terms of the type of programs you were making and how the company was run. And I wondered, with your clients now, how you help them future-proof themselves and future-proof, as far as possible, what they are doing and staying ahead of the curve creatively.
Yeah, well, then it was much easier for people to not challenge themselves, because there were many fewer indies and a lot more work, and people were taking risks. These days, the market kind of does a lot of that work for me, because if you're staying still, you're not working, right? It's not, you can't really stay still. You can't be comfortable. There were a lot of producers who were our contemporaries who were doing things differently, just because they could, just because it was comfortable. In the market today, if you're comfortable, you're behind. So the market is usually giving my clients the information that they need to change and stay ahead and grow, and then I'm just there to help them do that. But I don't have to push too much. I can find ways with them to stay ahead and to innovate. Because if you're not innovate, the truth is though, it's much harder to innovate on broadcast TV. It's almost impossible. But you can innovate in other ways through the models that you use, through the platforms that you share on. I mean, you have to innovate in different ways. You can't just sell a show that's original to BBC 4 or it doesn't exist anymore, to Channel 4, because it won't take it, right?
Jordan, you can...
Yeah, I was just thinking, we know now that neurodivergents are overrepresented.
Oh, sorry. Can I just give you a microphone? Only because they
Yeah.
can't hear at the back. Will that stretch? I don't want to.
Yeah.
If you wouldn't mind.
That would be great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank
I was
you.
just going to say that we now know that neurodivergents are overrepresented maybe in the creative industry, or certainly very, very prevalent. And I wondered if you have a great deal of experience in coaching in that area, knowingly or just suspecting that of your clients, and if so, if you could speak to some of the unique challenges both in coaching them and in what they actually face in their careers that you help them with, said from a fellow neurodivergent. So.
Thank you.
The truth is, I do coach quite a few people who are neurodivergent, both diagnosed and self-diagnosed. And it kind of seems to work, but I don't exactly know how. I mean, my job as a coach is to dance in the moment with my client. And so I take my lead from you. It's not like I have a program and you follow it. So it's very much about checking in to find out what's working and what isn't working, and what the cadence of coaching is that works for you. And since we're all effectively on a spectrum, that differs from different people. Some people like check-ins every day. Some people like a Monday check-in and a Friday check-in. Some people like set homework. Some people find that daunting. Some people. So it's just different for different people. And my job is to give them what they need, not necessarily what they want, but what they need and what they respond to and what they're capable of. And yeah, that differs a lot.
Do you find that they have some common challenges within creative industries in presenting themselves, or more importantly, in promoting themselves correctly?
Common challenges. Jordan was just asking about common challenges.
Common challenges for people who are neurodivergent.
To present themselves in the industry.
I think possibly some of the challenges which would have been more in the past are less now because, I mean, my phone hasn't rung in 10 years. Right? People communicate at their own pace, in their own time. So having to be caught in the moment on a call. So verbal communication and present in the room is much less frequent. It's much more about, even interviews now are often done not just on video, but like you record the video. But they ask the questions and you record the video at your own pace. And so there are lots of things that have happened societally that I think are more prevalent in our industry now and suit people who are neurodivergent more because so much of the programming has been created by people who themselves are neurodivergent. But I definitely think we can learn a lot from people who are neurodivergent because the other day I got an email from a neurodivergent client who sent me and a whole bunch of other people on the chain a sheet about how to work with them. I find this difficult, I find this challenging, I'm good in these situations, I'm not good in these other situations. And it just made me think how useful that would be for each of us to be able to do that because we all have special ways of being that are different for each of us. And I think maybe the prevalence of neurodivergent people in our industry and others is given permission to the rest of us to be more ourselves and more self-expressed and more clear about our needs.
And I think everyone's welcome at the table now. You know, we're catering for all and we're, you know, actively trying to support, which is, I think, wonderful. So that's a great change from 15 years ago. What tends to hold creative people back from leading themselves effectively, would you say? Is that too big of a question, really?
Well, the short answer we probably would find boring because we kind of covered it. It's like their own sense of what's possible and their own limitations, their own self-beliefs. And I think that definitely is at the core of it.
So you've worked across film, TV and digital media, Remy. Do the same leadership patterns appear in every sector or is it slightly different?
No, every sector thinks that their pain is exquisite and unique. And that no one could possibly understand it unless they'd worked in that company or that sector. But no, what I found is, and I've interestingly found this in other ways because a lot of I get some clients through partners and friends. So my main practice is around people in the creative industry, but they also have husbands and wives. And so those people come to me and they're often in completely unrelated fields and their problems are exactly the same. The issues that we face as human beings, as leaders, is exactly the same.
Yeah. Now, this is a big question. Sorry.
You go first.
Wait, I was going to ask about AI.
Yes.
AI, and you know, what does leadership look like now? How's it changed it all? And what are you noticing? I mean, you were here pre-AI, you were super successful, and now we've got AI. What's going to happen to us all?
Well, it's one of the things you have to embrace and work with as a leader. So, you know, we may not want it, we may not like it, we may be scared of it, but you can't exist and lead in this industry and not use it and embrace it. I was leading a workshop of 12 creatives from around the world, and we asked this question, and a couple of people were brave enough to say, oh yeah, I love AI, I use AI in everything. And a few people said, oh, I hate AI, I've never used it, I don't have it. And as the day progressed, it became clear that they all did use it. It's just some people are more comfortable with it owning that, and some people feel like it makes them seem less creative. But look, there's lots of things which most of us know AI can do, and it can do it really well. And we need to use those ways to make our lives better and to do the things which only humans can do. So there's something that happens in one-to-one coaching that only happens in one-to-one coaching. But I've developed a product which is called Coacher, and it's to work with organizations who can't afford to coach everyone in their organization. Like, even as it is, I usually only get called in to coach the CEO or someone in the C-suite, maybe the chief creative officer. But everyone else, we haven't got money for coaching, we can't afford coaching. So with a partner, I've developed a product which offers world-class coaching to everyone in your organization for pennies. Because I think it's important that everyone has access to the best advice and mentorship and guidance and business advice possible. And if they can afford one-to-one coaching, they will enjoy the difference. But if they can't, why should they not have it? So I think what applies to me applies to all of us, right? If it's delivering something that you couldn't offer at scale or you couldn't do in a certain way, you should use it. Yeah. And in terms of structures and systems and ideas, I write a column for the Hollywood Reporter, and it's about having a perspective on things that have happened in Hollywood over the last 100 years. Well, it would take a researcher weeks to find out what AI can find out in a few minutes about similar shows, similar themes which have been explored. It lists the titles for me, and I can just shove them into my article. Yeah. And then I have the rest of the day to do interesting things. So I think it's really useful for all of us to look at what are the things which only I can do. And by the way, that's something that I was coaching leaders to ask themselves long before AI. Because if you're doing something else which someone else could do, they should do it. There are things which only you can do. As a founder, that list comes with the job, right? There are conversations only you can have, relationships only you can manage, and that's what you need to be doing. If you're doing the job of the publicist and the manager and the agent and the secretary, you're wasting your time, and you're not playing to your strengths, and you're not optimizing your own asset, which is you. So optimizing the asset that is you, you now have an extra way to do that, which is a research assistant called AI, an organizer called AI, a whole bunch of other things called AI, and that frees you up to do the thing that only you can do. Yeah. Only I can be here in this room having this conversation with you, but I might not be able to be here if I didn't have help, support.
So embrace it. That's right.
Embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it.
So hi, here I am again. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Nadia. Lovely to meet you. And I had another question. So I've been an actress for over a while, and I'm now kind of starting to want to get into the international scene. And my question was, what's the difference that you see between successful actors and actresses and the not so successful ones? Thank you.
I'm really not sure I have enough experience
with the actors.
of actors to give that other than anecdotal experience, but I think although it might seem strange, if you see yourself as a product and service rather than make it about yourself, then you get the support and the advice that you need rather than what you want. Because so I think, bizarrely, the most successful actors I know are not attached. They see themselves, they talk about themselves in the third person. It sounds a little bit Hollywood, a little bit wanky, but they talk about what Sunita needs rather than saying I. But they think of themselves as a product and a service in the market. And just like any of us, if you're answering the needs of the market, you'll do well. And if you're making it about what you love and want and are passionate about, you probably won't.
So there are a lot of people in this room that are founders and freelancers. I mean, we've had some great questions. What one shift would help them unlock more of their own potential, would you say? One-to-one coaching with Remy. Great answer.
It's one shift. I really don't know. I mean, one shift. There are so many different shifts that are helpful. That it's hard to distill into one thing.
But definitely the daily affirmations.
Definitely.
That I'm taking home.
Definitely daily affirmations, and definitely getting clear about what's important to you. Which is work around values, which we haven't really discussed, but that again is something that no one can take away. Like, if you're living true to your purpose, then everything goes much more easily, and you can really only live true to your purpose if you know what your purpose is. So most people die at the average age of 83, which from a life coach's perspective is wonderful because that's 1,000 months. 83 and a half years is exactly 1,000 months. So we have 1,000 months.
Good business.
And I called my first company 1,000 months. But when I explained to people why, it was so depressing. But getting clear on what your purpose. So most people live for 83 and a half years, and there was a wonderful woman called Bronnie Ware who wrote a book called The 5 Regrets of the Dying. Has anyone read that? A few people. And one of the 5 regrets was, I wish I'd been true to my purpose. And one of the other 5 regrets was, I wish I hadn't lived the life other people wanted or needed or expected of me. Well, to live the life you want and not the life other people want, need, and expect of you, you have to know what you want, what your purpose is. And that all starts with what's important to you and your values. So I think getting clear on your values and your life purpose is the number one piece of advice I would give to everyone, because then you can live a life that you choose, and that you can have two huge regrets taken away. Just since we're on the subject of regrets, it's probably worth saying that the other regrets were, I wish I'd been more playful, had more fun, more travel, more adventure. I wish I'd connected more profoundly with the people I loved, and I wish I hadn't spent so much time in the office.
Yeah. And in fact, I think I've read that in one of your newsletters, which you can sign up for. They're fantastic. And you often write about fear as being a creative force. And, I'm not ashamed to admit I've got plenty of fear. How can leaders work with fear rather than, resisting and working against it?
Well, fear is a sign in your body usually that something is at stake. Right? You're not fearful of things that don't matter. If we're talking about being afraid of creative decisions or like a career move, like I'm not talking about being afraid of a lion or afraid of a truck coming at you. If you're afraid of something in your life, it's usually because something is at risk. And if you don't take risks, nothing will happen. So we've talked about the saboteur voice, which is just there to keep you alive, and it's always saying don't take any risks. But fear is sort of the other side of that. It's a feeling of, this could put me in jeopardy, right? And usually the thing that's in jeopardy again is failure, right? This might not work, this might not connect with an audience, this might fail. And those are all good things to be feeling, because if there's no chance of huge failure, there's probably no chance of huge success. And the one thing that no one needs now, certainly in TV and film, is average programming in the middle, right? That no one's watching that, no one's commissioning that. So programs that could upset or offend a lot of people might also really engage with a lot of people, and they might love it. And you just have to ask yourself, you have to just go through that whole process of saying, what am I really afraid of? What would I be afraid of if I don't do this? And recognize that the fear is your body's way of saying, I care about this, a lot's at stake, and look at it and go with it. Treat that fear as a kind of opening to creativity rather than as a stop sign. But many people go, oh, that's a bit scary, and then walk away. Rather than, oh, that's a bit scary, why? I wonder why. What's interesting? Why is it scary? Why am I feeling this way? I mean, look, sometimes fear in our body, it comes from the past, right? Past trauma, past experience, past pain, past ways of behavior that brought that on, and definitely it's worth looking at breaking that cycle, because if the fear is that I'm going to act in the same way that I did before and bring about the same result, then that's worth looking at too, just so that it can stop you from doing that, because the thing you might be afraid of is not, it might be yourself.
Sir, I have a question. Yeah. Well, I guess what you're saying is really interesting, because I feel a lot of what you're saying comes from a place of privilege. To be able to sit here and say, are you safe? Are you able to show up for yourself? And I guess a lot of us sitting in this room can say, we are privileged people because we're self-aware. And I guess my question to you is that the reality of the industry now is that it's made a lot of changes, but it's still a struggle for female producers to get work.
it's still a struggle for black and brown people to get work commissioned to show up in these TV shows. And I guess you as a coach is how do you help people with the reality of the industry that it may be a struggle for them to get into these places? I look at behind the scenes within television and there's still a lack of diversity. We're seeing with TV companies that they're merging, so people are being made redundant. What's happening with ITV, daytime television. I guess with what you're saying is amazing and it's hopeful, it's optimistic, it's encouraging, it's affirming. But how do you advise them on the realities of what's happening today? And that's not to be pessimistic, it's just the truth of where we are.
Yeah, so where do I start? Maybe with the feeling of difference. Like, I think very often when we feel other, we don't do ourselves any favors on a human level because we make our otherness a barrier. I mean, not that it isn't already a barrier, but we increase that because truth is, I was coaching a group of business leaders in Paris. It was LGBT business leaders, and actually felt like the 1950s. They kind of came in secretly, and it was like they were almost like ashamed to be there. It was a strange thing, and I think France is a little behind that way. But what we were looking at was how each of them felt they had to be perfect, and they had to be flawless, and they had to be better than everyone, and they had to be accomplish more in order to deserve a seat at the table. And I think that's definitely true for people of color. I think it's often true for women. Like, when you are different, you feel like you have to be better than everyone and do better than everyone and be perfect. And what that does is it creates a barrier. Because if I'm being perfect, then I'm not being human. And I stop being a person and I become a thing. And the moment I talk to you about what's not working, where I'm struggling, how I'm worried about my mom, how I'm struggling with my relationship with my brother, suddenly you may have a brother, you may have a mom. We connect on a different level and it doesn't become about that point of view. So I think coaching around difference is its own thing. And that, as you say, it's improved marginally, but not much. That's, as human beings, we're kind of pre-programmed to reach out to people who look just like us. Like, you take a little baby and it will reach out to the person in the room who looks like it, even though it doesn't know it's a white baby or a brown baby. It will reach out to a white or a brown person because there's something about our programming that makes us have affinity with people who remind us of ourselves. And so TV is no different than other industries in that sense, in that as long as it's mostly run by white men, straight white men, it will mostly, those people will do best. But when we're different, we have to not lose the one thing that's most powerful, which is our ability to connect on a human level. In terms of the whole kind of canary down the mine question, it's a tough one, right? It's a tough one.
But we are changing, we are evolving, things are getting marginally better, but even as a 54-year-old lady, you know, it's hard to break back through into the industry. So, I mean, when you took a punt on me, there were hardly any people of colour on the television, and you know, I found a lot of resistance. And now it would totally be unacceptable. You know, it wouldn't be acceptable, but it still happens, right? It still happens.
And yeah, the change is more visible on screen than behind the scenes, because as Aston suggested, like, there's not many black-run, black-owned production companies getting commissions and doing well. There are a few, but not many. So where the ownership lies hasn't really changed. Structurally, it hasn't really changed that much. Not nearly as much as it could. But the ways to combat it are slightly counterintuitive sometimes, because sometimes we're doing things that don't help us, right? So I had a client the other day, and she's not getting called back for interviews, and she's very, very experienced, and she was putting it down to ageism. Now, to your point, I don't for a second deny that ageism exists. It's real. And it's very, very real in our industry, and she's a woman in her late 50s. But there were also other things she was doing that weren't helping her. And some of that had to do with her experience. And as long as she was just saying, oh, I'm not getting the jobs because I'm old, nothing was going to change. And we looked at what she was doing, and one of the things she was doing was she was coming across as so accomplished and so experienced that the person interviewing her might, in my opinion, have wondered what their role would be if they gave her the job. Because, you know, when the questions came around, in her case, like, so, you know, how would you see this working and what would you need from me? She was like, well, I probably don't need anything from you. I'm a self-cleaning oven. I can do it all. And they looked at her CV and they saw that that was true. And who was getting hired was the person who said to the boss, well, I probably need your guidance a lot if I got this role, and I probably need you to teach me, and I probably have to come into once a week, and would you mentor me? And to someone else's point earlier, that person, well, they may have been saying it legitimately because they actually felt that they would need that guidance, but they may have been saying it because they were putting themselves in the position of the boss, the person interviewing them, and realizing that that person also needed to be needed, that person also needed to be relevant, that person also needed to have someone. So sometimes the things that are endemic in our industry are very real and prevalent, but we can navigate around them with a little bit of savvy.
Any more questions in the room? Yeah? Can you boom?
Remy, you seem very organised, and I'd like to know, how do you organise do you think you're organised? How do you organise your time, and how do you get there?
You're saying how Remy's very organised.
Yeah, you're saying Remy's very organised, and there's a man in the second row with a bald head who's looking very amused at that. So, that's my. Well, yeah. So I'm just saying that's my life partner, Henrik. He would disagree with you. He thinks I'm incredibly chaotic and disorganized. But I'm organised in certain things that matter. Like I'm organised in work ways, right? I'm not. If you looked in my wardrobe, you wouldn't think I was organised. There's no like socks neatly lined up. But I try to get back to people very quickly. I try to prioritise the most important thing for me to do every day. I have a list of things to do, and I just do the most important ones, and the rest tend to not happen or disappear because they're not that important. So having a clear sense of what's important to you, and trying to respond quickly to the things that you need to respond to, I find helps, but those are just a couple of hacks.
You've got another lovely hack, which again I've read in one of your newsletters, and it's the 2-minute rule. So if something comes into your inbox or a text, you know, try and action it within 2 minutes. I mean, sometimes I can and sometimes I can't, but you know, it's planted now. You know, it's a nice rule to try and live by.
Well, if it's worth getting back to, get back to it in 2 minutes, but that doesn't mean you should get back to everything, right? So your inbox is really other people's to-do lists. So just pick the ones that you care about, and if the other ones are really, really, really important to that person, they will come back to you. And that's the thing about persistence, right? Like, you need to be persistent because in a world where most of us are getting hundreds of emails every day, we will go with the energy. So if you've written asking for something and you don't get a reply, ask 3 more times, ask 4 more times, ask until you get the reply, because the person on the other end is probably thinking, it's not that important to you. If you haven't pestered me about it in a while, you probably don't care. And it's always your to-do list. Your email is the thing you want. So why would I care about it unless you really do? And that kind of extends to everything we're talking about. Like, if you're being your best agent, then you really are persistent for that person. If you're the agent who kind of just disappears once they haven't heard back, that's the kind of agent you would actually fire if they were your agent. Well, you didn't call them back, you didn't persist, you didn't push, but we act like that for ourselves and then we think it's okay. It's not. You won't get results.
Yeah, and actually that's true. I used to work in the property industry, and again, that's changed so much, but we are sort of, they're a little bit more active than they used to be of old, which is a good thing, I guess. With technology, everything is just so much quicker. Now, you've also faced major challenges personally throughout your life. How has that shaped your perspective on resilience and, of course, vitality, which is part of your company branding, right? Vitality Guru.
Yeah, so 1,000 months is the thing which leads people to thinking about death, which they don't want. And vitality is the thing which is about life, which we do want. So I just flipped it around and gave the market what it wants, which is vitality, not 1,000 months left to live, which most people have. But in terms of my own life experience, I mean, if I could give every single person on the planet a terminal diagnosis from which they then recovered, I would do that, because that's what happened to me. Yeah. I was told I was going to die. I had months left to live. I had a night left to live. I was so ill I could was allowed by St. Thomas's Hospital to bring my Irish Terrier Sam into the hospital bed with me, and I lived. And facing the end and then having time is the biggest kick there is, because in that moment you realize life is not my awards in the closet, not that there were many. Life is not money in the bank. Life is not my achievements. Life is who I love. Life is who loves me. And once you're clear on that, and you know, to Aston's point, like, we are all very privileged in being safe and free and solvent and sane, and celebrating that is where I start my day now. Everything else is a bonus, but that's amazing. Having those things, our health, our sanity, our life itself. So I've just used that awareness that life gifted me to have a sense of perspective, which I hope I get to share.
And being grateful, I guess, being grateful. And looking back on your career in television, which was obviously fabulous, what's the greatest stuff that you took from that industry that now has transferred into coaching and makes you the great coach you are today?
Well, I guess I got to see stuff on the ground. You know, there are some coaches out there who start life at 20, 25. They're young coaches and inexperienced coaches, and I got to experience in the trenches from the ground up what it's like to work in our industry, and I got to see pretty much not every situation, but I got to see many situations, many problems from multiple angles, right? As an employee, as an employer, as a founder, as a director of programs. So I saw lots of different situations and challenges from lots of different perspectives, and I use all of that intelligence and knowledge to coach people, because I am a business coach, right? I think when people talk about coaching, they often think it's about living your best life or something, but that's not what I do. What I do is help you define where you want to go and then help you get there. And part of the reason I'm able to do that is because I have been there myself.
Yeah, you've walked the walk, basically. So any more questions? I've got one. Yeah, sure.
My question is about affirmations, and I know because I've been coached by you in the groups, we've talked about this, but actually,
do you think everyone has to have their own unique affirmations, or is it like a crib sheet? Because this is one thing I struggle with, working out what the affirmations are.
Well, there are some that we just talked about, which I shared with you earlier, which kind of, just are, right? And we're privileged that that's the case, that you're healthy, I'm sane, I'm free, I'm solvent. And then there are some which need to be designed specifically for your saboteur, because each of us have a different voice in our head that's saying different things, right? For some it's saying, you're too old. Some are saying, you're too inexperienced. And you need the affirmation to counter the voice in your head, because otherwise you're just alone with a voice in your head that's saying, you can't do that. And so the affirmations are designed specifically to be the voice of your intentional self that says what is. And some affirmations start out with things I'm not entirely sure about, but by saying them aloud every day, I become more and more sure of them. So a good affirmation is one that the voice in your head is really resistant to. And I would start, if you're thinking of writing affirmations, by writing all the basic stuff down that you're grateful for, because Sunita's point about gratitude is really important. Grateful people are happy people. If you're not grateful, you won't be joyful and content. The moment you engage with what is, I'm so grateful and happy to be alive. I'm so grateful and happy to be safe. So grateful and happy to be loved and loving. Start with those, because that's just the basics, and then move into the ones which, you know, your saboteur may not agree with, but say them anyway.
Any more questions? Okay. Loud.
Can you hear me?
Yes, you can.
I'm Hamza. Just first of all, thank you so much for today. I've genuinely taken away so many useful insights, and I'm pretty sure from nodding heads, I think that's true for so many people in the room. And you have such a lovely energy, so thank you. I feel like we've touched on it a bit today, but we talked about how quickly this industry is changing and shifting, TV to digital, AI. And I find, I've just started a new role, and I find decision making and strategy really daunting and quite difficult. And in this new role, I've taken a little bit of a step up, and people are relying on me for an opinion. And it maybe, this is untrue, but it feels like it may have been easier at one point because there was more peers around, there was a longer lead time to the craft, it was maybe easier to access the sort of things that help you make that decision. But I just wonder whether you had any advice on systems of thinking around strategic decision making, especially when things are moving so fast and our industry sometimes is contracting and getting smaller, and so they can feel like very high-risk decisions.
Yeah, in the time remaining, I probably don't have a way of answering the bigger question, but within that is about how to communicate opinions with leadership, right? You're being asked for your opinion all the time and you have to generate it. So a couple of bits of advice. One is just performative, right? Deliver whatever you're going to say in a way that is low and slow, and keep your body language still, because there's something about leadership that looks a certain way, and when people are deliberate and low and slow in their communication, they seem like leaders. So a lot of us growing up in the creative industries, we learn to speak really quickly and modulate our voice a lot. Energy was all where it's at, because we have to be creative engines, right? And creative engines are great, but they're not leaders. If you just talk low and slow and remain still, you'll have a gravitas that just comes with that. The second, it's just a hack, but I'll share it with you anyway. Make a statement, whatever the statement is, then back it up with a piece of evidence, and then go into the action point. So an example of that might be, I think all of us should go and have Italian food at the restaurant on Dean Street on the corner, because most people like Italian food, they serve vegan options, and they've got a lot of tables and they're open now. So so that's the evidence, and then the action is, so if everyone agrees, I'll book a table now. So statement, evidence, action. It makes it easier for people to come along with you for the ride. It's not your opinion, it is sort of, but it's an opinion backed up by evidence, and then with a clear follow-up.
Thank you.
Any more questions? So I've got one final question, if that's okay. If everyone here were to remember one idea from today, what would you want it to be?
Use fear as the gateway to creativity.
Great, thank you. Remy Blumenfeld, thank you so much.